I found your body under the snow. You're a heartbeat, but the bear is slow.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Firstly, a big thank you to all your lovely comments about Barbie last week. They were very appreciated, and although we console ourselves with the thought that it was the right thing to do and all that kind of stuff, it's still never a particularly easy thing to do, shall we say. So yes, all your comments were really appreciated. So that's a big heartfelt thank you. So on today's episode of the show, I really enjoyed last week's episode of the show, so I thought I'll do another rum episode. And the difference between last week's episode and this week's episode is that we're just looking at one particular producer or brand or whatever you want to call it, because it's basically brand new to the UK market. So a big thank you to Robert at High Fern, who has taken on importing this particular rum from Central America. And so it's a lot of Central American words, which I'm probably going to get the pronunciation wrong. But so we are looking at Cihuatan Rum from El Salvador. Now, when Robert first emailed me and said, "Oh, I'm importing this El Salvador rum, do you fancy trying it?" And I thought, well, I've never tasted a rum from El Salvador before, so yeah. It seems to me that sort of rum is still in its renaissance phase. I guess importers and distributors are still trying to sort of like push the category, I suppose, for want of a better word, given that last year saw quite a renaissance in rum sales to the somewhat detriment of gin sales, shall we say. Even though there's still I get emails about new gins appearing, new gin distilleries, and I'm thinking, can't sell the stuff at the moment, nobody's buying it, but people are buying rum, which is really cool, and hence why I'm doing another episode of the show on it, because plan is to kind of like not only sort of do a bit of advertising for the product, but obviously hopefully try and sell it to you guys. I'm not going to disguise that fact. So the distillery itself, the Chihutan distillery, was founded in 2004 in the Chihutan Valley in El Salvador. So, kind of makes sense, call it that, I suppose. It is part of another company, or owned by a company called Ingenio La Cabaña, who are a big sugar producing company. And I guess the point was that it's use up the byproduct. I believe it's molasses that they use, which is obviously a byproduct of the sugar industry, and it's no different to sort of many of the other sort of sugarcane producing regions of the world. In this instant, I suppose that because it was part of a larger organisation, there was no initial need to actually get a product out to market, so they basically gave it time, which was really good. In actual fact, their first bottling didn't appear till 2014, which was 10 years after the distillery had actually started, and so they've obviously got some aged stocks. And certainly when I introduce the lineup and explain the particular bottlings, you will see that we're not talking about sort of like incredibly young spirit here. We're talking about some spirit with a bit of age to it, which is really good. Now the distillery itself uses a 4-column still, and produces both light and heavy rums, which it blends together. Now the term light and heavy rum is quite well used, and probably a lot of people don't fully understand it. So basically what you have is obviously each column of the column still creates in essence a sort of like a highly rectified spirit. So basically your first column brings the ABV up to 10, 12, 15%, and so on and so forth, and each of the columns obviously has a different number of plates in, so you can control the amount of rectification in each of the columns. Now the heavy rums that are produced on a column still essentially mean they are full of congeners, they have a lot more flavour, and in this distillery's case, basically they run off once they've passed through the third column of the column still, which has apparently, I think the first one has 14 plates, second column has 26 plates, third one has 14 plates, and then they run it off at about mid-70s ABV. Then the lighter rums move on to the final rectifying column, which has 50 odd plates, and so essentially you're removing more of the heavier alcohols, more of the heavier congeners, and you get a lighter style of rum, and that's run off at about mid-90s. And then basically the two of them blend, well, I'm guessing, I don't know for exactly, I'm assuming that both of them are then blended together and then sort of put into cask, or watered down and then put into cask. So and this is one of the lovely things about rum. I mean, you don't necessarily have to blend them once they come off the still. You can age the two rums separately, and this gives you a huge palate to play with, to be honest with you, much more so than your average Scottish distillery. And then you throw in the fact that a lot of these rum distilleries will use different types of cask. I mean, obviously, you know, we saw last week with Richard Seal using a number of different cask types, Madeira, port, etc., etc. You've then got a huge palette to play with, and what will often happen is that you will get a distillery will create a core range and then release some sort of limited editions each year, which is exactly what Chihutan actually does. And so it allows the blender to basically have, you know, a set style, a house style, and then it allows them to play around a bit with maybe some different cask types, maybe different balance of light and heavy rums, and so you get something a little bit different. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess all blenders you know, like to experiment and play around, and you know, I would imagine, I wouldn't say it gets boring, just basically producing the same thing day in, day out, but you know, they're creative people and they want to sort of be creative, but obviously they have to sort of work within the confines of the distillery style and all that kind of stuff. So obviously by bringing out a limited edition allows them to sort of go a bit crazy sometimes, I suppose. But anyway, before the product was actually launched onto the UK market, it had a big, what's that horrible term, brand refresh. If you look at earlier bottlings of this particular rum, it's a fairly standard kind of label, and I can't remember the agency they farmed it out to, but they went big time on the whole Mayan history, shall we say. Now, and I mean, I've got some of the lovely little leaflets. I mean, you know, look at that. I mean, that has, I mean, talk about sort of, you know, kind of overkill of Mayan or sort of Mayan influenced kind of art, and they're pretty garish. I mean, they're going to stand out on the shelves, and let's put it this way, they're not the first and they're probably not the last distillery that's going to sort of like, you know, mine the mythology of the country or the area that they're in. I mean, several Scottish and Irish distilleries, you know, are well versed in that kind of thing, and I mean, I've got no issue with that at the end of the day. I mean, you know, yes, your product has to stand out on a shelf and it has to be visually appealing, because, you know, a lot of customers do buy with their eyes. I mean, I hear that time and time again. Somebody said, oh, I love the look of that, you know. Thankfully, because it's on my shelf, the product's going to be good, you know. I wouldn't just stock something, obviously, because it looked nice, you know. So yeah, I'm a bit of a sucker for mythology, as you well know. So yeah, I can kind of live with all of that kind of packaging and marketing. I mean, it does get a little bit cheesy, shall we say, in places when it's sort of like, you know, oh, taste our history and you know, experience our whatever, you know, and you kind of think, okay, yeah, I'll forgive you that, you know, because at the end of the day, like I said, always it's the juice in the bottle is what counts. You know, if you've got a lovely product and great packaging, marketing and all that kind of stuff, then brilliant. You know, if you product isn't very good, then you can have the greatest marketing and packaging on the face of the planet, but no one's going to buy it because your product's awful. But anyway, we shall indeed find out whether the product is good or not. So I think I've waffled enough. If you want to find out more information, you can either log on to the distillery's website or Robert's website, and the addresses are in the usual place. So let's just crack on and take a look at the lineup. Right, okay, so the first bottling we'll be looking at is called the Indigo. It's an 8-year-old, wholly aged in American ex-bourbon casks, bottled at 46%, and will probably hit the shelves at $39.95. So, yeah, nice price. We shall see whether it's got the complexity that we're looking for. The second bottling we'll be looking at is called Cinabarrio. This is a 12-year-old bottled at 40%, and all of these names have relevance to relevant aspects of Mayan culture and what have you, and this would sit on the shelf at $47.95. So, you know, a little bit of a step up, but still, you know, value seems about right. Third bottling we're looking at is the limited edition release of this year, called Sumerio, which I think means something about the celebration of love. Isn't that nice? No, honestly, I wasn't being facetious. No, this is basically, like the last three, a blend of light and heavy rums, but the age is slightly upped on this. There are between 12 and 14-year-old spirits in this particular bottling, and apparently includes a batch of single vintage heavy rum, which is again 14 years old. So like I said, this is the bottling where I can't remember what the lady's name is, Gabriella Ayala, I believe, gives her the opportunity to sort of have a bit of a play around. So we shall see what that one is like. And the last bottling we'll be looking at is called the Zaman XO. Now I'm pretty certain that XO, apart from meaning extra old, doesn't actually have a sort of a legal age designation in rum. I mean, I've seen it used a number of occasions, the interesting thing about this particular bottling, now this isn't cheap, this is $96.95, or will be when it hits the shelf, or if it hits the shelf I should say. So it's basically, again, a blend of the two different types of spirit, aged for 15 years in ex-bourbon, and then finished for 12 months in Mayan Ciba barrels. And I'm thinking, what the hell is Ciba? I assumed some kind of, you know, drink, but in actual fact, when I looked it up, because I honestly had no clue, it turns out that it's a type of tree. So the barrels will obviously be made from the Ciba tree. Now, apparently, the Ciba tree is revered in Mayan culture as the tree of life. I mean, you know, it's not an uncommon part of, you know, ancient cultures, mythologies to have a tree of life. You know, certainly the Vikings had one, and it's, you know, the sort of the kind of link between sort of like earth, heaven, and the underworld. You know, essentially, but not only was it sort of, you know, obviously a sacred object to the Mayans, it was obviously a pretty useful object as well. I mean, you know, they used the wood to make barrels, obviously, and boats, and they used the inner pulp to make stuffed pillows and things like that. And apparently the bark was used as in you know, for medicinal purposes. I don't think it got you high, but I think it relieved headaches, I believe. But anyway, so it's a sacred tree, and I guess, I don't know whether they had to get sort of special permission to sort of chop one of these trees down to turn into barrels. I have absolutely no idea. I mean, one imagines they may well be sort of, you know, protected in that way. But so anyway, that is going to be really quite interesting, because and this is the twist, shall we say? So not only has it got a good age to it, you've obviously got 12 months finishing in that, and I like spirits that use indigenous oak. I mean, you've had the Glengoyne Scottish oak, that was really intriguing. I love the use of Mizunara oak in a number of the Japanese whiskies. It's a nice touch at the end of the day, and we'll see whether it adds anything really interesting to the actual flavour of the spirit. So yeah, that's this week's little lineup. Let's kick off with a bit of indigo then, shall we? Right, okay, so let's kick off with the indigo. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? That's a nice nose. Elegant, more emphasis towards the lighter style of rum. It's got a lovely, dried fruit character, slightly high-toned, sort of think more sultana than, say, raisins. There's a little bit of green banana, green pineapple, sort of underripe, almost tropical fruit, not lush tropical fruit, but slightly underripe. There's a little bit of oak, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of white chocolate. There's a slight floral edge to it, possibly sort of orange blossomy kind of like. All told, I think that's a lovely nose. It's well balanced, it's not overly oaked, the spirit is certainly showing through, it's got plenty of character. Yeah, let's see what passes on. That's got plenty of character, plenty of flavour. It kicks off with the oak. It's lightly milky, sort of slightly creamy, milky coffee. It feels like, and then you get the sort of the lighter, but deep dried fruits kind of coming through. Again, think sort of more lighter dried fruits. Again, and then the oak sort of comes back a little bit. It's a little bit chocolatey, a little bit milky again. Lovely spiciness as well, right on the finish. Again, it's not a bitter spice. It's a soft, slightly sweeter spice. And you know what? That's a lovely rum for 8 years old. It's lovely and soft. It's got plenty of character. It's elegant, and you know what? I really like that. I think that's absolutely lovely. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Cinabarrio. So let's see what an extra 4 years does to the spirit. Very much like the indigo, but obviously it's got a little bit more maturity, a little bit more spiciness. Again, I'm getting that sort of slightly milky coffee kind of oak character. There's possibly a little bit more of a herbal rancio happening, sort of herbally foresty kind of note. Touch of caramelised orange, a little less of the floral note. So we're now just starting to see maybe a little bit more of the wood spices creep in, which is obviously just sort of like taking the edge off the floral notes, but you're getting a little bit more depth. There's a nuttiness as well, and again I think that's really nice. That's a lovely rum. It's not sort of whacking you around the face with loads of sort of like monstrous character. It's elegant. It's elegant, it's delicate, it's refined, but it's got depth to it, and can't ask for more than that, can you really? Don't pass it. Juicy, elegant, succulent, again, like the nose. Follows a very similar path to the indigo. Got that lovely sort of milky coffee oaky kind of character, but again it's not OTT on the oak. There's plenty of sort of lighter dried oxidized fruit. Again, a little bit more spice right on the finish, and the spice is sort of a little drier, not quite so sweet as the spice notes in the indigo. But again, it's just, you know, just a well balanced, lovely rum at the end of the day, and yeah, I like that.
The flowers in your hand are tainted with blood. All the words have the rotten core.
Right, okay, so let's move on to the Sumerio. So we're upping the price a little bit now, so, you know, $64.95, but it's a limited edition, and let's see what the nose gives us. Right, well, more heavy column still rums are very much evident straight off the bat. In fact, it's got an almost pot still richness to it. Dark honey, marzipan, incense, lovely spice, dried apricot, a little darker fruit wise. We've still got sort of sultanas, but there's a bit more of a date. There's a bit of raisin coming through now. Some dark chocolate. I mean, that is lovely. I mean, that really has got lovely weight to it. But I can see the progression. It still has that slight sort of, very slight sort of milky coffee kind of note, but the oak is very much sitting behind the heavier, slightly darker dried fruit character. See what it passes like. That is lovely, that's beautiful. The only negative point, I think I would like to have seen that bottled at a slightly higher ABV. If that had been bottled at 43, maybe even 46, I suppose it probably would have kind of brought out the spices a little bit more. I mean, there's plenty of spices there, and there's a lovely sort of oxidized, darker fruit character, dark honey, date, raisin, cocoa. Again, not a huge amount of oak character. The oak character is there in the background, but sitting behind the fruit. I think they missed something slightly here in releasing. I can understand why the other two bottlings are bottled at 40%. I don't think it's a detriment to them, but yeah, me being me, I would have personally bottled the whole lot at 46%. You know, forgo the filtration, 46%. You know, if you're going to do the European market, I think realistically you have to think about that, because we're not fixated by it, but it's, you know, it's just the way of these things. But rum distillers do seem to be kind of more set in their ways than, say, whiskey distillers do. Whiskey distillers do seem to be more open to sort of going, yep, okay, we need to sort of, like, you know, up the ABV. We need to sort of, like, you know, because that's what the market want. Maybe because rum distillers are more concerned about their local market, and maybe their local market isn't so sort of, like, you know, has issues with alcohol content, I guess. I don't know, but I mean, it's a lovely rum, don't get me wrong. I mean, that is absolutely gorgeous. And like I said, you can see the progression of the house style with that sort of little bit of a difference. But I personally, like I said, if I was going to sort of, like, you know, bottle this, I would see what it was like at 43 or 46%. Maybe, you know, it kind of like kicks it out of balance a bit. Maybe, you know, you don't, you know, what's her name? Apologies for not remembering. Gabriella probably didn't want a bit of a big spicy monster, and maybe that would have impacted upon the elegance. I don't know. At the end of the day, I'd love to find out, but, you know, anyway, it's still plenty. Right, okay, so on to the final rum of the day. This is the Zaman XO. See what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Again, we're back to that lovely balance of light and heavy rums. Again, there's maybe a little bit more emphasis on the heavier rums, but not as far as, say, the Sumerio. It's obviously more mature. There's darker, almost slightly balsamic-y kind of notes. Dried apple, apricot, leather, clove. It's also got an interesting kind of herbally kind of potpourri note, and I can only imagine this is obviously what the Ciba barrels are bringing to it, because certainly I've not picked up that note in any of the other bottlings. So as far as I can see, that kind of herbally note, and yeah, all right, there was a little bit of a herbal rancio on the Sumerio, but not quite in the same manner. And to me, that must mean that note is coming from the oak, and that's what I want. I mean, this is just absolutely spot on. It's got all the character. I'm getting the character of the distillery. I'm getting the wood character, and it's not masked. It's not blanketed in sherry and all that kind of stuff. And to me, absolutely great. I mean, because that's exactly what someone's going to say to me. They're going to say, what's this cedarwood business? What does that add to it? And you can tell them. It's great. I mean, this is just a lovely nose. It comes in a lovely bottle as well, as you would expect. Something costing that kind of money. They've certainly done their work on that kind of thing. And but the juice is damn good. That's all I can say. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Mouth-filling, juicy, soft. Again, it has that sort of milky coffee kind of note running through it. And again, I'm getting that sort of slightly herbally potpourri kind of character on the finish. Again, slightly more emphasis towards the heavier rums. A little bit of spice, more darker fruits, dark honey, cocoa, leather. Again, that is a lovely whiskey, but rum. But again, I think they've just missed on not bottling this at 46%. I mean, at the end of the day, obviously there's a cost implication to bottling at 40% as opposed to bottling at 46%. But when you're bottling something that's going to sort of like hit the shelves at 90 plus quid, a few quid extra because it's 46% is really neither here nor there. At the other end, when you're sort of like your entry level bottling is, you want it to hit that sort of, 30-40 pound kind of price point, then obviously everything that sort of goes into it is, is more kind of noticeable, I suppose. But the opposite end of the spectrum, when you're in the sort of like the luxury end, I suppose, or what do they call it? I can't remember what the bloody marketing people call it, it doesn't really make that much difference, whether it's sort of like retails for sort of like 95.95 or 99.95 is really, at the end of the day, not a huge issue. So again, I think maybe Gabriella has missed something here and not actually pushing for this to be bottled at 46%. I don't know how much influence that a blender has in the overall scheme of things in these kind of distilleries that are part of bigger companies and what have you. I mean, if you're working at an individual distillery, I imagine that the sort of head distiller has quite a lot of say in basically what gets bottled. In these kind of companies, I don't know if that is indeed the case. It may well not be, because you've probably got, boards above you, management structures and all that kind of stuff. So, but like I said, I think, I would have loved to have seen that 46%. Yes, it probably would have just given it a bit more, but I mean, it's still a beautiful rum, and I would have no issue with selling that whatsoever. So, yeah. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. I think on the whole, I'm impressed. I really like this rum. I think this is, a good rum. Yes, I have a couple of issues about the ABV on a couple of the bottlings, but that's just kind of like a personal thing. But I think overall, I'm really impressed with the quality. I like the packaging, and you know, I'd be more than happy to sell them to you guys. And I'm hoping you guys would go, yeah, I'm more than happy to buy a bottle off you. Hopefully, you know, I'll get some stock in. Well, I would imagine probably next month. I mean, God knows what's going to happen Christmas this year. Are we going to have a sort of a lockdown Christmas? Are we going to have a week where we can be unlocked down? I mean, you know, I have no idea. Anyway, I mean, you can still click and collect, or we can deliver, you know, so, you know, there's no need to sort of like say, well, I can't buy Aunt Mabel her bottle of whatever, you know, or what have you. So, but anyway, today's episode of the show, big thank you to Robert from Highfern. I hope you've enjoyed my review of your new range. I hope the distillery has kind of like enjoyed my review, and I hope you guys have enjoyed the review, and I hope you guys will put your hand in your pocket and buy a bottle. I mean, that would be icing on the cake, as they say. But so like I said, really interesting rum, and well. Anyway, next week we'll probably get back to whiskey. I know you're probably sort of itching for another episode of the show, and I've got some interesting stuff in lined up. It's just a question of whether I can shoehorn it in you know, before Christmas or what have you. But anyway, that's a nice problem to have, I suppose, at the end of the day. Anyway, I think that's about enough for today. So all that's left to say is good afternoon and good running.